The dust settled on Zelda Ashford's worn boots as she stepped down from the stagecoach in White Pine, Nevada, her hand instinctively moving to adjust the faded burgundy shawl draped over her shoulders despite the oppressive August heat of 1878. She pressed the fabric closer to her body, trying to conceal what she had been hiding for months now, the gentle swell of her belly that seemed to grow more obvious with each passing day. The other passengers barely spared her a glance as they collected their belongings, too focused on their own concerns to notice the way her fingers trembled, or how her eyes darted nervously around the dusty main street of this small mining town nestled in the Egan Range. White Pine had seen better days. That much was clear from the weathered storefronts and the occasional boarded-up window, but it still bustled with activity as miners and cowboys went about their business. Zelda had chosen this place specifically because nobody knew her here, because she could disappear into the anonymity of a frontier town where people minded their own affairs. At 22 years old, she had left everything behind in Sacramento, fleeing the shame that would have followed her if anyone had discovered her condition. The father of her child had made his position abundantly clear when she had told him about the baby, his face turning cold as stone as he informed her that he was engaged to the daughter of a wealthy banker, and that she should never contact him again. The memory still stung like a fresh wound, but Zelda had no time for self-pity. She needed to find work and a place to stay before her condition became too obvious to hide. The shawl had served its purpose during her journey, but she knew it would not conceal her secret much longer. She was nearly 5 months along now, and though her slender frame had not yet fully revealed the truth, she could feel the changes in her body every day. Zelda picked up her single worn carpet bag and started walking down the main street, searching for the boarding house that the stagecoach driver had mentioned. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, trying to conserve what little money she had left. Her vision blurred slightly at the edges, and she stumbled, catching herself against a wooden post. "Madam, you all right there?" The voice came from behind her, deep and genuinely concerned. Zelda straightened quickly, pulling her shawl tighter despite the heat, and turned to find herself looking up at a tall cowboy with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water in spring. He stood a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands, revealing sandy brown hair that looked like it could use a good cutting. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with a strong jaw and a nose that had been broken at least once. What struck her most was the kindness in his expression, something she had not encountered in far too long. "I am fine, thank you," Zelda said, hearing the weakness in her own voice and hating it. "Just tired from the journey." The cowboy nodded slowly, but his eyes had already caught what she had been trying to hide. His gaze had moved to where she clutched the shawl, to the way she stood with her weight shifted to accommodate the changes in her body. She saw the moment of recognition in his face, but instead of the judgment or disdain she had come to expect, his expression softened further. "Name is Kane Atwood," he said, still keeping his distance. "I work at the Silver Creek Ranch just outside town. You look like you could use some water and a place to sit down. The boarding house is still a ways up the street." Zelda hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to refuse, to maintain her independence and not rely on anyone, especially not a man. But her body was making decisions her pride could not override. She nodded slightly, and Kane gestured toward a nearby bench outside the general store. He disappeared inside and returned moments later with a canteen and a wrapped sandwich. "The store owner's wife, Mrs. Patterson. She always keeps some food on hand for travelers," he explained, handing them to Zelda. "Go on, you need it." Zelda's hands shook as she accepted the offerings, her stomach growling loudly enough that Kane surely heard it. She drank deeply from the canteen, the cool water the best thing she had tasted in days, then unwrapped the sandwich and forced herself to eat slowly despite wanting to devour it. Kane sat on the opposite end of the bench, giving her space, his hat resting on his knee. He did not stare at her, instead watching the street with a casual ease that somehow made her feel less exposed. They sat in silence for several minutes while she ate, and Zelda found herself stealing glances at this stranger who had shown her unexpected kindness. "I noticed you trying to hide it," Kane said finally, his voice quiet enough that passers-by would not hear. "The baby, I mean." Zelda's hand froze halfway to her mouth, her heart hammering in her chest. She looked at him sharply, ready to deny everything, but the words died on her lips when she saw his expression. There was no judgment there, no condemnation, just that same gentle concern. "You do not need to explain anything to me," Kane continued, turning to meet her eyes directly. "But I want you to know something, if you will hear me out." Zelda found herself nodding, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Kane took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for something important. "I know we just met, and you have no reason to trust me or believe what I am about to say. But I can see you are alone, and I can see you are scared, and I know this town well enough to know what happens to women in your situation." He paused, and Zelda felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely, refusing to cry in front of this stranger. "I will be the father," Kane said simply, the words hanging in the hot afternoon air between them like something tangible. "To that baby, I mean. If you will let me, I will marry you, give the child my name, and no one in this town needs to know anything different. You will be respected as Mrs. Atwood, and your baby will have a father." Zelda stared at him, certain she had misheard, that the heat and her exhaustion had caused her to hallucinate. "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Why would you do that for a complete stranger?" Kane looked down at his hat, turning it slowly in his hands. "My sister," he said after a long moment. "Sarah. She found herself in a similar situation about 5 years back. The man who got her pregnant wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. Our parents had already passed, and it was just the two of us. I tried to help her, tried to protect her, but the town we lived in back in Kansas, they were cruel. The things they said to her, the names they called her." His jaw tightened, and Zelda saw the pain in his eyes. "She lost the baby at 6 months along. The doctor said it was the stress, the shame, the way she had been treated. She died 3 days later from the bleeding that would not stop." "I am so sorry," Zelda said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "I made a promise at her grave," Kane continued, his voice rough with emotion, "that if I ever had the chance to help someone in that situation, I would. That I would not let another woman suffer the way Sarah did, not if I could prevent it." Zelda felt the tears she had been holding back begin to fall, trailing hot paths down her dusty cheeks. "You do not even know me. I could be anyone. I could be running from the law, or I could have done terrible things." "Are you running from the law?" Kane asked, a hint of gentle humor in his voice. "No." "Did you do terrible things?" "No," Zelda said again, more firmly this time. "Then I reckon we are starting on decent enough ground," Kane said. He looked at her fully then, his green eyes searching hers. "I am not asking you to love me, or even to like me much. I know this is not how anyone dreams their life will go, but I am offering you a choice, a way forward that does not involve shame or hiding or being treated like you are less than what you are." "What am I?" Zelda asked, the question surprising even herself. "A woman who needs help," Kane said simply. A woman who is brave enough to travel alone to a strange town to build a new life. A woman who is going to be a mother. The simple truth of his words broke something open inside Zelda. She had been holding herself together through sheer will for so long, had been so focused on survival that she had not allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. Now, faced with this unexpected offer of help, of genuine kindness, she felt herself crumbling. "I do not have anything to offer you," she said through her tears. "No dowry, no family connections, nothing. I have $23 to my name and the clothes in this bag." "I am not asking for anything," Kane said, "except maybe that you think about my offer. You do not have to decide right now. Let me help you get settled at the boarding house and you can take some time to consider it. If you decide you would rather go your own way, I will respect that. But if you decide you want to accept, we can go to the minister tomorrow and make it official." Zelda looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer. She had been too afraid to speak aloud. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was too good to be true, that there had to be some catch, some hidden motive. But looking into Kane's honest face, she found herself wanting to believe in the possibility of genuine goodness. "Why are you not already married?" she asked, needing to know. "A man like you, with a steady job and kindness to spare, surely you could have your pick of women in this territory." Kane smiled slightly, the first real smile she had seen from him. "I have been told I am too serious, too focused on work. The ranch keeps me busy and I have not had much time for courting. Truth is, after watching what Sarah went through, I have been wary of romance. Seems to me that love can be a dangerous thing, especially for women." "It can be," Zelda agreed, thinking of the man who had left her in this condition, who had spoken words of love while his actions proved them lies. "So maybe we are both better off with an arrangement based on honesty and mutual respect rather than fleeting passion," Kane suggested. "Maybe that is a stronger foundation anyway." Zelda finished the sandwich, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. The practical part of her knew that Kane's offer was more than she could have hoped for, a solution to the seemingly impossible situation she faced. But accepting help, letting herself rely on someone after being so thoroughly betrayed, felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness. "Tell me about the ranch," she said instead of addressing his proposal directly. "What do you do there?" Kane's face brightened slightly at the question. "Silver Creek Ranch runs about 200 head of cattle. The owner, Mr. Henry Carmichael, he is a good man, fair and honest. I started there 3 years ago as a regular ranch hand, but I have worked my way up to foreman. It is hard work, long days in the saddle, but it is honest and the pay is steady. There is a small house on the property that comes with the foreman position. Right now I am living in the bunkhouse with the other hands because the house needs some repairs, but I have been fixing it up in my spare time. It has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a good solid roof." "You were planning to move into it?" Zelda asked. "Eventually," Kane said. "Though it did not seem as pressing when it was just going to be me rattling around in there. But if you were to accept my offer, it would be a proper home for you and the baby. There is even a small garden plot that the previous foreman's wife used to tend. It is overgrown now, but it could be brought back." The image he painted was almost too perfect, too much like the life Zelda had imagined for herself before everything fell apart. A home, a garden, a husband who provided, and a child to raise. It was everything she had wanted, just not in the order or manner she had expected. "What would people think?" Zelda asked. "If we married so quickly after I arrived in town," Kane shrugged. "I reckon they would think I fell hard and fast for a pretty woman on the stagecoach. It happens. Men out here do not always have the luxury of long courtships. When you meet someone you want to build a life with, You do not waste time. As long as we present a united front, as long as our story is consistent, there is no reason for anyone to question it. And when the baby comes early. Zelda pressed, needing to know he had thought this through. People can count months, Kane. First babies come early sometimes, Kane said calmly. It is not that unusual, and frankly, it is nobody's business but ours. The important thing is that the child will have my name and will be treated as legitimate. That protection is worth more than avoiding some gossip. Zelda looked down at her hands, at the calluses she had developed from taking in washing and mending to support herself, before she had to flee Sacramento. She thought about the alternative to Kane's offer, about trying to find work while her pregnancy advanced, about giving birth alone or in some charity hospital, about trying to raise a child as an unmarried mother in a society that would brand both of them with shame. If I agreed, she said slowly, what would you expect from me? As your wife, I mean. Kane met her eyes steadily. I would expect honesty first and foremost. I would expect you to treat me with basic respect as I would treat you. I would expect you to care for our home and, if you are willing, perhaps help with the household accounts and such. But I would not force you to anything you are not comfortable with. We would have separate bedrooms, at least until you felt otherwise, and what happens between us would be your choice entirely. The relief that flooded through Zelda at his words was immense. She had been terrified that accepting his help would mean submitting to demands she was not ready for, that she would be trading one form of powerlessness for another. You would be content with that, she asked. A marriage in name only. I would be content with helping you and raising a child with a woman I respect, Kane said. Anything beyond that, well, I reckon we will figure it out as we go. No expectations, no pressure. We will be partners, working together to build something good. Zelda felt something settle in her chest, a decision forming even though part of her still thought she must be losing her mind. But what was the alternative? She had run out of options, run out of places to hide, run out of strength to do this alone. I need to ask you something, she said. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Always, Kane promised. Are you doing this only because of your sister? Is this just about keeping a promise to her memory? Kane considered the question carefully before answering. Sarah's memory is part of it, he admitted. But it is not the only reason. Truth is, I have been alone for 3 years now since I came to Nevada. I have been focused on work, on building a life, but it has been a lonely existence. The idea of having a family, even if it starts in an unconventional way, it appeals to me. I would like to be a father, to have someone to come home to build something that matters beyond just work and wages. So yes, I am keeping a promise to Sarah, but I am also doing this for myself. His honesty touched something deep inside Zelda. She understood loneliness, understood the hunger for connection and purpose. Maybe they could give those things to each other, even if it started as an arrangement rather than a romance. All right, she said, her voice stronger than it had been since she arrived in White Pine. I accept your offer, Kane Atwood. I will marry you. The smile that spread across Kane's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, warm and genuine and full of hope. You have made me very happy, Zelda. May I ask your full name? Ashford, she said. Zelda Ashford. Though I suppose it will be Atwood soon enough. Zelda Atwood, Kane repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. It suits you. Now, let me help you get to the boarding house so you can rest properly. Tomorrow we will see the minister, and then I will speak to Mr. Carmichael about moving into the foreman's house sooner than planned. He stood and offered her his hand. Zelda looked at it for a moment, this offered connection, this lifeline in the storm. Then she placed her hand in his and let him help her to her feet. His grip was warm and calloused from hard work, strong but gentle. They walked together through the dusty streets of White Pine, Nevada, two strangers who had just agreed to bind their lives together. Zelda felt the curious glances of townspeople as they passed, could almost hear them wondering who she was and what her connection to Kane Atwood might be. Tomorrow, those questions would be answered when they married, and the story would spread through town like wildfire. The boarding house was a two-story structure with a wide porch and relatively fresh paint, better maintained than many of the other buildings on the street. Kane carried Zelda's carpetbag as they climbed the steps, and a plump woman with graying hair and kind eyes answered the door at Kane's knock. "Mrs. Morrison, good afternoon," Kane said politely. "This is Miss Zelda Ashford. She just arrived on the stage and needs a room." Mrs. Morrison's sharp eyes took in Zelda's appearance, the worn dress, the shawl despite the heat, the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. But whatever she thought, she kept it to herself, her expression remaining professionally pleasant. "I have a room available on the second floor, nice and quiet. 35 cents a night includes breakfast and supper. Washing water is provided, but baths are extra." "I will take it," Zelda said quickly, mentally calculating how long her money would last at that rate. "Actually, Mrs. Morrison, Miss Ashford will only need the room for one night," Kane interjected. "We are getting married tomorrow and she will be moving to the ranch with me." Mrs. Morrison's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline, and Zelda saw the speculation in her expression. This was it, the beginning of the story that would define them in this town. "Is that so?" Mrs. Morrison said, her tone carefully neutral. "Well, congratulations to you both. It is always nice to see young people finding happiness." "Thank you, madam," Kane said smoothly. "It is not every day a man is lucky enough to meet the woman he wants to spend his life with." The way he said it, with such conviction, almost made Zelda believe it herself. She felt a flutter of something in her chest, gratitude certainly, but also the first small seed of something that might eventually grow into genuine affection. Mrs. Morrison showed Zelda to her room, a small but clean space with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. It was more luxury than Zelda had experienced in months. Mrs. Morrison left her with a pitcher of fresh water and a promise that supper would be served at 6 o'clock. Alone finally, Zelda removed her shawl and looked down at her swelling belly. She placed both hands over it, feeling the firm roundness that was her child growing inside her. "We are going to be all right," she whispered to the baby. "We found help. We found someone good." She washed her face and hands, changed into the slightly less worn of her two dresses, and lay down on the bed. Sleep claimed her almost instantly, the exhaustion of weeks of travel and worry finally catching up with her now that she felt safe enough to let her guard down. Zelda woke to a knock on her door, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. The light coming through the window had shifted, suggesting it was late afternoon. She opened the door to find Mrs. Morrison holding a tray. "Mr. Atwood thought you might want something to eat before supper," the boarding house keeper said, carrying the tray inside and setting it on the small table by the window. "He seems quite taken with you, my dear." "He is very kind," Zelda said carefully, not sure how much to reveal. "Kane Atwood is one of the good ones," Mrs. Morrison said, her tone becoming more confidential. "Lost his sister a few years back, came out here to make a fresh start. Works hard, stays out of trouble, always respectful. You could do much worse." "I am beginning to realize that," Zelda said honestly. Mrs. Morrison looked at her for a long moment, and Zelda had the uncomfortable feeling that those sharp eyes saw more than she wanted to reveal. But the older woman simply nodded and moved toward the door. "Whatever your story is, dear, "It is your own business," she said kindly. "But I will tell you this. White Pine may be a rough town in many ways, but we also know how to mind our own affairs and let people build the lives they choose. You will find acceptance here if you are willing to work for it." After Mrs. Morrison left, Zelda ate the simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried apples, savoring each bite. She felt the baby move inside her for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings against her ribs. The sensation brought tears to her eyes. Despite everything that had happened, despite the fear and uncertainty, this child was a gift. And now, thanks to Kane's unexpected offer, the baby would have a chance at a good life. As the sun set over White Pine, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Zelda stood at her window and watched the town settle into evening. Tomorrow her life would change irrevocably. Tomorrow she would become Kane Atwood's wife, would take on a new name and a new identity. The thought was terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. She thought about the man who had fathered her child, the one who had abandoned them both without a second thought. He had been handsome and charming, had spoken words of love that she had believed with all her young heart. But his love had been conditional, contingent on convenience and social advantage. Kane was offering her something different, something based on honesty and choice rather than passion and promises. Maybe this arrangement, as unconventional as it was, had a better chance of lasting than what she had thought was real love. Maybe commitment built on respect and mutual need was stronger than romance built on fleeting emotion. Zelda slept better that night than she had in months, lulled by the feeling of safety and the promise of a future that did not involve facing everything alone. Morning came bright and clear, and Zelda dressed in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she had carefully preserved for important occasions. She brushed her dark hair until it shone and pinned it up in a neat bun. Looking at herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked older than her 22 years, marked by hardship but also by a new determination. Kane arrived at the boarding house at 9 o'clock, dressed in clean trousers and a white shirt that looked freshly pressed. He held his hat in his hands and had obviously made an effort to tame his unruly hair. When he saw Zelda descending the stairs, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "You look beautiful," he said, and there was no flattery in his tone, just simple honesty. "Thank you," Zelda replied, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "You look very nice as well." They walked together to the small white church at the edge of town. Reverend Thomas was a balding man in his 50s who greeted them warmly. If he had any suspicions about the hasty marriage, he kept them to himself, focused instead on the sacred nature of the vows they were about to take. "You have witnesses?" the Reverend asked. "I asked Mrs. Morrison and Mr. Carmichael from the ranch," Kane said. "They should be here shortly." Indeed, within minutes both witnesses arrived. Mr. Carmichael was a weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He greeted Zelda warmly and seemed genuinely pleased for Kane. "It is about time you settled down, Atwood," he said with a gentle smile. "That house has been waiting for a family." The ceremony was simple and brief, but the words carried weight that Zelda felt in her bones. When Kane slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she looked down at it in wonder. She had not expected a ring, had not even thought about it, but seeing it there on her hand made everything feel suddenly real. "I bought it yesterday afternoon," Kane explained quietly. "Figured you should have a proper ring." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Kane looked at Zelda with a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, giving permission, and he leaned down to kiss her gently on the cheek. It was chaste and respectful, but Zelda felt warmth spread through her at the contact. They signed the marriage certificate, Mrs. Morrison and Mr. Carmichael adding their names as witnesses. And just like that, Zelda Ashford became Zelda Atwood. She had a new name, a new husband, and a new life beginning in this dusty mining town in the Nevada Territory. Mr. Carmichael invited them to lunch at the hotel restaurant, and they spent a pleasant hour getting to know each other better. Zelda learned that Kane had been working with horses and cattle since he was 14, that he had learned to read from his mother, and had a small collection of books that he treasured. Mr. Carmichael spoke proudly of the ranch and the improvements Kane had made since becoming foreman. "You have a good man here, Mrs. Atwood," the ranch owner said. "He is honest, hardworking, and has a real gift with animals. The ranch has prospered under his management." After lunch, Kane helped Zelda collect her belongings from the boarding house, and they walked to where his horse was hitched outside the general store. It was a sturdy buckskin gelding that stood patiently as Kane secured Zelda's carpet bag to the saddle. "I know it is not ideal, but we will have to ride together," Kane said. "The ranch is about 5 miles outside town, too far to walk in your condition." Zelda nodded, and Kane helped her up onto the horse before swinging up behind her. She sat sideways across the saddle, and Kane's arms came around her to hold the reins. She could feel the solid warmth of his chest against her back, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather. It was the closest she had been to any man since discovering her pregnancy, and she was surprised to find she did not mind it. They rode out of White Pine at an easy pace, the horses' hooves kicking up small clouds of dust on the hard, packed road. The landscape around them was harsh but beautiful, sagebrush-dotted valleys giving way to distant mountains. The August heat was intense, but a slight breeze made it bearable. "Tell me about your family," Kane said as they rode, "if you are comfortable doing so." Zelda was quiet for a moment, deciding how much to share. "My parents died when I was 16, she said finally. "Cholera outbreak in Sacramento. I went to live with my mother's sister, my Aunt Martha. She was kind enough, but she had 5 children of her own and not much room or resources for another mouth to feed. I found work as a seamstress and tried to contribute what I could." "Is that where you met him?" Kane asked gently. "The father?" "Yes," Zelda said, the word coming out bitter. "He was a lawyer. Came to the shop where I worked to have some suits altered. He was charming and attentive, and I was young and foolish enough to believe that someone like him could truly care for someone like me. When I told him about the baby, he made it very clear that I had misunderstood the nature of our relationship. He gave me $50 and told me never to contact him again." Kane's arms tightened slightly around her, though his voice remained calm. "He is a fool and a coward." "I should have known better," Zelda said. "My aunt certainly warned me, but I thought what we had was real." "The fault is his, not yours," Kane said firmly. "A man who takes advantage of a woman's affections and then abandons her when there are consequences is beneath contempt. You deserved better, and your child deserves better." "Thank you," Zelda whispered, touched by his vehemence on her behalf. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Zelda found herself relaxing against Kane's solid presence. The motion of the horse was soothing, and the landscape had a spare beauty that appealed to her. "There," Kane said, pointing ahead. "That is Silver Creek Ranch." Zelda looked where he indicated and saw a collection of buildings nestled in a valley where a line of cottonwood trees suggested water. There was a large barn, several corrals with horses and cattle, a bunkhouse, and a main ranch house. Off to one side, slightly separated from the other structures, stood a smaller house with a pitched roof and a covered porch. "That will be our home," Kane said, and Zelda heard pride in his voice. "It needs some work still, but the bones are good." As they rode into the ranch yard, several cowboys looked up from their work, their expressions curious. Kane nodded to them but did not stop to chat, riding directly to the small house and helping Zelda dismount. Up close, Zelda could see that the house was indeed solid, built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney. The porch sagged slightly on one end, and the windows needed cleaning, but it had a good feel to it, a sense of potential. Kane unlocked the front door and gestured for Zelda to enter. The interior was dim and dusty, but Zelda could see the care that Kane had already put into it. The wooden floor had been swept clean, and the walls had been recently whitewashed. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a black iron stove in one corner and a simple wooden table with 2 chairs. 2 doors led off the main room to what must be the bedrooms. "I know it is not much yet," Kane said, sounding almost nervous. "But I have been working on it when I have time. The roof is sound, I made sure of that first, and the stove works well, I tested it myself." "It is wonderful," Zelda said honestly, running her hand along the smooth wood of the table. "It is more than I could have hoped for." Kane showed her the bedrooms, both small but adequate, with simple bed frames and mattresses. One had a window overlooking the porch, the other looked out toward the mountains. "I thought you might want this one," Kane said, indicating the room with the porch view. "It gets nice light in the mornings. I brought some blankets and linens from the bunkhouse, and I can get more from town if needed." "This is perfect," Zelda assured him. She looked around the small room that would be hers, trying to imagine it with her few possessions arranged, maybe some curtains on the window. "Thank you, Kane, for all of this." "I should be thanking you," Kane said, "for trusting me, for giving me the chance to make good on the promise I made to Sarah, for letting me be part of your child's life." They stood looking at each other in the dusty afternoon light, 2 people still strangers in so many ways, bound together by circumstance and choice. Zelda felt the baby move inside her again, stronger this time, and without thinking, she placed her hand over her belly. Kane's eyes followed the gesture, and his expression softened. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her stomach. Zelda hesitated only a moment before nodding. Kane stepped closer and placed his large, calloused hand gently over hers, over the place where their child rested. They stood like that for a long moment, connected by this simple touch, by the life that was growing between them even if it did not carry Kane's blood. "I will do right by this child," Kane promised, his voice rough with emotion. "I will love it and protect it and give it the best life I can provide. You have my word." "I believe you," Zelda said, and realized she meant it. The first weeks of their marriage fell into a rhythm that surprised Zelda with its ease. Kane woke before dawn and headed out to work on the ranch, often not returning until after dark. But he always came home, and that simple fact meant more to Zelda than she could express. He would wash up at the pump outside and then join her for the simple suppers she prepared, telling her about his day and asking about hers. Zelda threw herself into making the house into a home. She scrubbed every surface until it gleamed, sewed curtains from fabric that Kane bought for her in town, and started working on the overgrown garden plot. The physical work felt good, gave her a sense of purpose beyond simply waiting for the baby to arrive. The other ranch hands were respectful and friendly, treating her with the deference due to the foreman's wife. If any of them suspected that her pregnancy was more advanced than a woman married only a few weeks should be, they kept it to themselves. Zelda began to relax slightly, to believe that maybe they could pull off this deception, that maybe she and her child could have a normal life here. Mrs. Carmichael, the ranch owner's wife, came to visit one afternoon about 3 weeks after the wedding. She was a practical woman in her late 50s who had raised 4 children on the frontier and had the no-nonsense manner of someone who had seen it all. "I brought you some things," she said, setting a basket on Zelda's newly scrubbed table. "Baby clothes that my grandchildren have outgrown, some fabric for making more, and a few receipts for remedies that help with the discomforts of pregnancy." Zelda felt her face flush, wondering how much Mrs. Carmichael knew or suspected, but the older woman simply smiled kindly and patted her hand. "I have eyes, dear, and I have been through pregnancy 4 times myself. I can see you are further along than a new bride would typically be. But that is your business and Kane's, and I admire a man who steps up to do the right thing." "He is a good man," Zelda said quietly. "The best, Mrs. Carmichael agreed. "My Henry thinks the world of him. Says Kane has the makings of a fine rancher if he ever decides to start his own spread." She paused, then added gently, "How are you feeling?" Truly, the kindness in her voice, the genuine concern, broke through Zelda's careful reserve. She found herself pouring out her worries to this woman she barely knew, talking about her fears for the birth, her uncertainty about being a mother, her guilt over the deception they were maintaining. Mrs. Carmichael listened without judgment, nodding at intervals, and when Zelda finally ran out of words, the older woman took both her hands. "Listen to me, Zelda Atwood. That baby growing inside you is innocent of any sin or shame. And the man who gave you his name, who is preparing to raise that child as his own, he has cleansed any stain that society might try to place on either of you. You are a married woman expecting a child, and that is all anyone needs to know. Hold your head high and trust in the life you and Kane are building." From that day forward, Mrs. Carmichael became a source of support and wisdom for Zelda. She taught her how to preserve food for the winter, how to manage household accounts, and how to prepare for the baby's arrival. More importantly, she provided companionship and acceptance that Zelda had not realized how desperately she needed. As September gave way to October, Zelda's pregnancy became impossible to hide, and she stopped wearing the shawl that had been her constant companion. Instead, she let her condition show, wearing the simple dresses that Mrs. Carmichael helped her alter to accommodate her growing belly. The townspeople they encountered on their weekly trips to White Pine congratulated them warmly, and if anyone counted months on their fingers, they did not do so publicly. Kane's tenderness toward Zelda grew as her pregnancy advanced. He helped her with tasks that became difficult, insisted she rest when she looked tired, and brought her small gifts from town: a piece of candy, a book he thought she might enjoy, a ribbon for her hair. These gestures touched Zelda deeply, and she found herself looking forward to his return each evening with an eagerness that went beyond simple gratitude. One evening in late October, after they had finished supper and were sitting together on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Zelda found the courage to ask something that had been on her mind. "Kane, you ever regret this? Taking on a ready-made family instead of finding someone you could court properly, someone you could fall in love with?" Kane was quiet for a long moment, and Zelda felt her heart sink, fearing his answer. But when he spoke, his words surprised her. "I do not regret it for a moment," he said firmly. "And as for love, well, who is to say it cannot grow from what we have? I care about you, Zelda. I look forward to coming home to you. I find myself thinking about you during the day, wondering what you are doing, hoping you are well. Maybe that is not the same as the romantic love in story books, but it feels pretty good to me." Zelda felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I care about you too," she admitted. "More than I expected to. More than I thought I could after what happened before. You have shown me what real kindness looks like, what real commitment means." Kane reached over and took her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. Then maybe we are building something even better than what most people have. Something based on truth and choice and respect. Maybe we are, Zelda agreed softly. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. The careful distance they had maintained began to dissolve, replaced by a growing warmth and affection. They began sitting closer together in the evenings, talking more openly about their hopes and fears. Kane started coming in from work earlier when he could, wanting to spend more time with Zelda. And Zelda found herself seeking out his company, his presence becoming as necessary to her as breathing. November brought the first real cold, and Kane spent his evenings making sure the house was properly insulated for winter. He cut and stacked firewood until they had enough to last through the worst of the weather, and he installed heavier curtains on the windows to keep out drafts. One morning, Zelda woke to find the world transformed by the first snowfall of the season. She stood at the window, marveling at how the white blanket softened the harsh landscape, making everything look clean and new. She felt Kane come up behind her, and he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Beautiful, is it not?" he said softly. "It is," Zelda agreed. She leaned back slightly, letting herself rest against his solid warmth, and felt his arms come around her, careful of her swollen belly. They stood like that for several minutes, just being together, and Zelda felt a peace she had never known before. "Kane," she said quietly, "I think I am falling in love with you." She felt him go still behind her, and for a moment she feared she had said too much, had pushed too far too fast. But then he turned her gently to face him, his green eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I know I am falling in love with you," he said. "I have been for weeks now, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you would think I was trying to take advantage or that I had expectations you were not ready for." "I am ready," Zelda said, reaching up to touch his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw. "I am ready for this to be a real marriage in every way, if you want that too." In answer, Kane leaned down and kissed her, really kissed her for the first time. It was gentle but passionate, full of all the feelings they had been holding back. Zelda felt tears spring to her eyes, but these were tears of joy, of relief, of homecoming. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "I want you to know something," he said. "I do not care that this baby is not mine by blood. It is mine in every way that matters, because it is part of you, and you are becoming everything to me." "Oh, Kane," Zelda whispered and kissed him again. That night, they moved Zelda's things into Kane's bedroom, and they became husband and wife in truth as well as name. Kane was tender and patient, mindful of her condition, and Zelda felt cherished in a way she never had before. This was what love was supposed to feel like, she realized. Not the desperate passion that had led her astray before, but this steady warmth, this deep caring, this commitment that went beyond words. December arrived with heavy snows that sometimes kept them housebound for days at a time. But Zelda did not mind. She spent the long winter days sewing baby clothes and preparing for the birth, while Kane worked on small projects around the house, or sat reading aloud to her from his treasured books. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Zelda leaning against Kane while he rubbed her aching back or talked to her belly, telling the baby stories about the ranch and the life they would have together. As Christmas approached, Zelda realized with a start that the baby could come at any time. Mrs. Carmichael had found her a midwife, an experienced woman named Agnes who lived in White Pine and had helped deliver most of the babies in the area for the past 20 years. "When your time comes, you send Kane for me day or night," Agnes had instructed during her visit to check on Zelda. "First babies can take a while, but we will make sure everything goes smoothly." On Christmas Eve, Kane surprised Zelda by bringing home a small pine tree that he had cut from the mountains. Together they decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments that Zelda had made, and Kane placed a single candle in a jar at the top. "I know it is not much," he said, "but I wanted you to have a proper Christmas." "It is perfect," Zelda said, meaning it absolutely. She had a gift for him too, a shirt she had sewn from fabric she had secretly bought on their last trip to town. He had a gift for her as well, a beautiful wooden cradle that he had been building in secret in the barn. "For our baby," he said as he brought it in and set it beside their bed. "I wanted it to be ready." Zelda ran her hand over the smooth wood, marveling at the craftsmanship. "It is beautiful. You made this." "I have been working on it for weeks," Kane admitted. "Wanted it to be perfect." That night they lay in bed together, the candlelight from the Christmas tree casting dancing shadows on the walls. Kane's hand rested on Zelda's belly and they felt the baby kick strongly. "Hello in there," Kane said softly. "This is your papa. I am so excited to meet you, we both are." Zelda felt tears slip down her cheeks as she watched her husband talk to their child. How had she gotten so lucky? How had this man appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most? "I love you," she told Kane. "I know I have said it before, but I need you to know how much I mean it. You have given me everything, a home, a family, a future. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." "You have given me all those things too," Kane said, pulling her close. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and existing but not really living. Now I have purpose, I have love, I have a family. You have made me complete, Zelda." They fell asleep holding each other, and Zelda had never felt more content or more loved. 2 days after Christmas, as a heavy snow fell outside, Zelda's labor began. The pain started in the early morning, waking her before dawn. She lay quietly for a while, timing them the way Mrs. Carmichael had taught her, not wanting to wake Kane until she was certain. But when the contractions grew stronger and closer together, she gently shook his shoulder. "Kane, it is time," she said. He was up immediately, pulling on clothes and boots with hands that shook slightly. "I will ride for Agnes. Will you be all right alone for a bit?" "I will be fine," Zelda assured him, though another contraction made her grip the bedpost. "Just hurry." Kane kissed her quickly and was gone, and Zelda heard the sound of his horse galloping away through the snow. Mrs. Carmichael had told her she would come too when the time arrived, and Zelda was grateful she would not have to face this alone. The pain was intense, worse than anything she had imagined, but Zelda tried to remember everything Agnes had told her about breathing through the contractions. She walked around the house, pausing to lean against furniture when the pains came, and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. Kane returned within an hour with both Agnes and Mrs. Carmichael, both women bundled against the cold. They took over with calm efficiency, helping Zelda into the bed, checking her progress and offering reassurance. "You are doing fine, dear," Agnes said. "The baby is positioned well and everything is progressing as it should. It will still be a while, though. First babies take their time." Kane hovered anxiously, clearly wanting to help but not sure what to do. Mrs. Carmichael shooed him out of the bedroom, telling him to keep the fire going and the water hot, and Kane retreated gratefully to tasks he could manage. The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and effort. Zelda had never worked so hard at anything in her life, her body consumed by the effort of bringing this new life into the world. Agnes and Mrs. Carmichael stayed with her constantly, wiping her forehead, helping her change positions, encouraging her to keep going. As evening approached and the winter darkness fell outside, the pains reached a crescendo that Zelda thought might break her. She cried out, gripping Mrs. Carmichael's hand so hard she feared she might crush the bones. "That is it, dear. You are almost there," Agnes coached. "One more big push should do it." Zelda gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed with all her might. She felt a sensation of release and pressure, and then suddenly the room was filled with a new sound, the strong, healthy cry of a newborn baby. "It is a boy," Agnes announced joyfully, holding up the squalling infant. "A beautiful, healthy boy, Kane," Mrs. Carmichael called. "Come meet your son." Kane burst through the door, his face pale and anxious, but his expression transformed when he saw the baby. Agnes quickly cleaned the infant and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Zelda's arms. Zelda looked down at her son, at his tiny perfect features and the shock of dark hair on his head, and felt a love so overwhelming it took her breath away. The baby stopped crying as soon as she held him, his dark eyes seeming to focus on her face. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama, and I love you so much." Kane knelt beside the bed, his eyes suspiciously bright as he looked at the baby. "Can I hold him?" Zelda carefully transferred the baby into Kane's arms and watched as her husband cradled their son with infinite tenderness. "He is perfect," Kane said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." "He has your nose," Zelda said with a tired smile, even though they both knew it was not true. But it was the story they would tell, and looking at Kane's face as he gazed at the baby, she knew it would not be a lie that mattered. Kane was this child's father in every way that counted. "What will you name him?" Agnes asked as she bustled about, cleaning up and making sure Zelda was comfortable. Zelda looked at Kane, realizing they had never discussed names. "What do you think?" she asked him. Kane thought for a moment, then said, "What about Thomas, after my father? He was a good man, honest and hardworking. I would like our son to have his name." "Thomas Atwood," Zelda said, testing how it sounded. "I like it, but what about a middle name you choose?" Kane said. "This is your son." "Our son," Zelda corrected firmly. "And I think his middle name should be Kane. Thomas Kane Atwood." The expression on Kane's face was one Zelda would treasure forever. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Absolutely certain," Zelda said. "You are his father, Kane. You have earned that title and more." Agnes and Mrs. Carmichael left after making sure both Zelda and baby Thomas were healthy and resting comfortably. Kane refused to leave their side, pulling a chair up beside the bed and keeping watch over them both through the night. Zelda dozed fitfully, waking each time Thomas stirred or made a sound. Agnes had helped her feed the baby, and Zelda marveled at how naturally it came, how Thomas seemed to know exactly what to do. As dawn broke on the day after Christmas, Zelda woke to find Kane asleep in his chair, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, one hand resting protectively on the cradle where Thomas slept. The early morning light painted everything in soft gold, and Zelda thought she had never seen anything more beautiful than this scene, her husband and her son, her family. Kane stirred and opened his eyes, immediately checking on the baby before looking at Zelda. "How are you feeling?" "Sore and tired, but happier than I have ever been," Zelda said honestly. "Come lie down with us. You must be exhausted." Kane carefully climbed into bed beside her, and they lay together watching their son sleep, both of them in awe of this tiny life they had created, if not through blood then through love and commitment. "Thank you," Zelda whispered, "for everything. For giving us both a chance, for loving us, for being the man you are." "I should be thanking you," Kane said. "You have given me a family, a purpose, a reason to be better than I thought I could be. I love you, Zelda. I love you and Thomas with everything I am." "I love you too," Zelda said, and kissed him softly. The first weeks with Thomas were exhausting but wonderful. The baby was healthy and seemed to grow stronger each day. Kane was a devoted father, getting up with Zelda for nighttime feedings even though he had to work the next day, changing diapers without complaint, and spending every spare moment holding and talking to his son. Word of Thomas's birth spread quickly through White Pine, and they received visitors bearing gifts and congratulations. If anyone privately calculated that the baby had come suspiciously early for a couple married only 4 months, they kept such thoughts to themselves. All anyone saw was a happy family, a devoted husband and father, and a beautiful, healthy baby. As winter deepened, Zelda and Kane settled into their new roles as parents. The house that had seemed so empty when Zelda first arrived now felt full of life and love. Thomas's cries and coos filled the rooms, and the cradle Kane had built rocked gently by the fire most evenings. One night in February, after they had finally gotten Thomas to sleep after a particularly fussy evening, Zelda and Kane collapsed onto their bed, exhausted but content. "Do you remember when we first met?" Zelda asked, snuggling into Kane's embrace. "On that bench outside the general store, I was so scared and alone, and you seemed to appear out of nowhere." "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen," Kane said. "Facing everything alone, trying so hard to hide your fear. I knew right then that I wanted to help you if you would let me." "I am so glad I let you," Zelda said. "I cannot imagine my life without you now. You and Thomas, you are everything to me." "You are everything to us," Kane said, kissing the top of her head. "My beautiful, brave wife." Spring came to Nevada slowly, the snow reluctantly giving way to green grass and wildflowers. Thomas was growing quickly, becoming more alert and responsive each day. He had Kane's smile, Zelda thought. Or maybe she just saw Kane in him because that was the truth of their hearts, even if it was not the truth of biology. In April, Mr. Carmichael approached Kane with a proposition. A neighboring ranch was for sale, about 300 acres with good water and grazing land. The owner had died, and his widow was moving back east to live with her daughter. "I know you are doing well as foreman, Kane," Mr. Carmichael said. "But you have the skills and knowledge to run your own spread. I would be willing to help you with the financing if you are interested." Kane brought the proposal to Zelda that evening, and they talked long into the night about the possibilities and the risks. It would mean hard work and sacrifice, would mean taking on debt and responsibility. But it would also mean building something that would be theirs, something they could pass on to Thomas and any other children they might have. "What do you want to do?" Zelda asked Kane. "Truly." "I want to build something for our family," Kane said. "I want Thomas to grow up on land we own, to learn ranching from me the way I learned from my father. But it is a big risk, and I would not do it without your agreement." "Then let us do it," Zelda said decisively. "Let us build our ranch and our future together." They named it the Atwood Ranch, and spent the next year working harder than either of them had ever worked before. Kane managed both properties until Mr. Carmichael could hire and train a new foreman, then threw himself into building up their own herd and improving the property. Zelda managed the household accounts, raised Thomas, and somehow also found time to plant a large garden and raise chickens. It was exhausting and sometimes overwhelming, but they faced every challenge together. When the work seemed impossible, they reminded each other of where they had started, of how far they had come. And they held tight to the love that had grown between them, the foundation that supported everything else. Thomas took his first steps on the porch of their new ranch house, a larger building that had needed significant repairs, but had good bones. Kane had been working on fixing the roof, while Zelda watched Thomas play on a blanket nearby. The baby had pulled himself up on a chair as he had been doing for weeks, but this time, instead of just standing, he let go and took 3 wobbling steps toward his mother before falling into her waiting arms. "Kane," Zelda called excitedly. He walked. Thomas walked. Kane scrambled down from the roof, so fast Zelda feared he would fall and break his neck. He scooped up Thomas and spun him around, both of them laughing. "That is my boy. Soon you will be running all over this ranch, helping me with the cattle." As Thomas grew into a toddler, it became clear he would be tall like Kane and have his steady temperament. He followed his father everywhere, imitating everything Kane did. And Kane was patient and loving, teaching Thomas about the animals, about the land, about the values of hard work and honesty. In the spring of 1881, when Thomas was just over 2 years old, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear or shame attached to the news, only joy. She told Kane over supper one evening, watching his face light up with delight. "Another baby," he breathed, coming around the table to kneel beside her chair and rest his hand on her still flat stomach. "Thomas is going to be a big brother." This pregnancy was different from the first in every way. Zelda was surrounded by love and support, secure in her marriage and her place in the community. Kane was protective and attentive, insisting she rest more and not overwork herself. Mrs. Carmichael visited regularly, bringing wisdom and encouragement. And Thomas, though too young to fully understand, seemed to sense something special was happening. In December of 1881, Zelda gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah after Kane's sister. The labor was shorter and easier than with Thomas, and when Kane held his daughter for the first time, tears streamed freely down his face. "She looks like you," he told Zelda. "She has your beautiful dark hair and your nose." Baby Sarah was indeed a perfect blend of both of them, and Zelda felt her heart expand to accommodate this new love. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to hold her and help take care of her under careful supervision. The Atwood Ranch continued to prosper over the next few years. Kane's hard work and skill with cattle earned him a reputation as one of the best ranchers in the territory. They expanded their herd, hired some help, and built additional outbuildings. The house was filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, with love and life. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Kane surprised Zelda with a gold locket he had ordered from San Francisco. Inside were tiny photographs of Thomas and Sarah. "I wanted you to have something beautiful," he said, as he fastened it around her neck. "Something that shows how much you mean to me." "You have already given me everything beautiful," Zelda said, touching the locket with wonder. "A home, children, love that I never dreamed could be so deep and true. You saved me, Kane. You saved both of us." "You saved me too," Kane said. "I was just existing before you came into my life. You taught me what it means to truly live, to love without holding back, to believe in the goodness that people can bring to each other's lives." They stood together on their porch as the sun set over the Nevada mountains, watching Thomas chase fireflies in the yard while Sarah toddled after him on unsteady legs. This life they had built was more than either of them could have imagined that hot August day in White Pine, when a frightened pregnant woman stepped off a stagecoach and a lonely cowboy decided to help. In 1883, Nevada achieved statehood, and the Atwoods celebrated with their neighbors at a community gathering in White Pine. Thomas, now 5, asked his father why everyone was so excited. "Because we are building something new here," Kane explained, hoisting his son onto his shoulders. "Just like our family, this state is growing and becoming something strong and lasting. We are all pioneers, son, building a future." That future continued to unfold in ways both expected and surprising. In the summer of 1884, Zelda gave birth to twin boys whom they named Daniel and Matthew. The house was suddenly very full and very loud, but also full of more love than its walls could contain. Kane hired more hands to help with the ranch, needing the extra support now that he had 4 young children and a wife who had her hands more than full. But he never let work keep him from his family. He made a point of eating supper with them every night, of putting the children to bed, of spending Sunday afternoons teaching Thomas to ride and letting Sarah help him with small chores. The children grew strong and healthy, raised on fresh air and hard work and unconditional love. Thomas showed an early aptitude for ranching, understanding cattle in an almost intuitive way that made Kane proud. Sarah was gentle with animals and had a talent for healing, often helping her mother tend to sick chickens or injured ranch dogs. The twins were still young but showed signs of being adventurous and mischievous. As the children grew older, Zelda sometimes wondered if she should tell Thomas the truth about his birth, about the fact that Kane was not his biological father. But watching them together, seeing how completely they belonged to each other, she could not bring herself to disturb that bond. Kane was Thomas's father in every way that mattered, had been from the moment he placed his hand on her belly and said, "I'll be the father." One evening when Thomas was 8 years old, he asked Kane where he got his darker coloring when both his parents were lighter. "You got it from your grandfather, my father," Kane said without hesitation, the lie coming easily because it felt like truth. "He had dark hair and eyes like yours. You look just like him." Thomas seemed satisfied with this explanation and went back to the toy horse he was carving. Zelda met Kane's eyes over the children's heads, and the understanding that passed between them needed no words. They were protecting their son, giving him the gift of belonging completely and without question. The years rolled on, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and family milestones. Thomas's 10th birthday, Sarah learning to bake bread with her mother, the twins starting to help with ranch chores, new horses and new calves and seasons changing. In the spring of 1888, Zelda realized she was pregnant again at 32 years old. She had thought they were done having children, but this surprise baby was welcomed with joy by the whole family. Kane was protective as always, insisting she rest more, and the children were excited about having another sibling. That December, Zelda gave birth to another daughter, whom they named Grace. She was a peaceful baby, content to watch the chaos of her older siblings with calm, dark eyes. As the 1880s drew to a close, the Atwood Ranch was firmly established as one of the most successful operations in the region. Kane had proven himself not just a skilled rancher, but also a fair employer and a respected member of the community. Zelda had grown from a frightened young woman into a confident ranch wife and mother, admired for her strength and kindness. They celebrated the new decade of 1890 with a party at the ranch, inviting neighboring families and all the people who had supported them over the years. Mr. and Mrs. Carmichael were there, now retired but still sharp and engaged. Mrs. Morrison from the boarding house, who had seen where it all began. Agnes the midwife, who had brought all 6 Atwood children safely into the world. As Zelda stood on her porch watching the celebration, Kane came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest the way he had on that snowy morning years ago. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," Zelda said. "About that terrified girl on the stagecoach and the kind cowboy who offered her everything." "That cowboy got the better end of the deal," Kane said, kissing her temple. "He got a wife he adores, 6 beautiful children, and a life richer than he ever imagined possible." "We both got exactly what we needed," Zelda said, turning in his arms to face him. "We found each other at exactly the right moment, and we built something beautiful together." "I love you," Kane said, the words as fresh and meaningful as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I have loved you from that first day, even if I did not know it yet, and I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," Zelda replied. "My husband, my partner, my heart." They kissed there on the porch while their children played in the yard, and their friends celebrated around them. Two people who had taken the broken pieces of their lives and created something whole and beautiful and lasting. As the years continued to pass, the Atwood children grew into fine young adults. Thomas, with his father's steady temperament and his mother's compassion, took over more and more of the ranch operations as Kane began to step back. He never knew that the blood in his veins came from a man who had abandoned him, only that his father was Kane Atwood, the man who had chosen him, loved him, and taught him everything that mattered. Sarah became a teacher in White Pine, beloved by her students and respected by the community. The twins, Daniel and Matthew, went into business together, opening a general store that served the growing town. And Grace, the youngest, showed early signs of being a gifted artist, filling the ranch house with drawings and paintings that captured the beauty of the Nevada landscape. Kane and Zelda grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces marked by years of laughter and hard work and joy. They sat together on their porch most evenings, watching the sun set over the ranch they had built, holding hands the way they had for decades. When Thomas married and brought his bride to live on the ranch, starting the next generation of Atwoods, Kane pulled Zelda close and whispered, "We did good, did we not?" "We did very good," Zelda agreed. "We built a legacy of love." As they watched their grandchildren play in the same yard where their own children had played, Zelda thought back to that hot August day in 1878 when she had stepped off a stagecoach in White Pine, Nevada, desperate and afraid and certain her life was over. She had been so wrong. Her life had not been ending, it had been beginning, all because a kind cowboy noticed a woman trying to hide her pregnancy under a shawl and had the courage to say 4 words that changed everything. "I'll be the father." Those words had been more than an offer of help. They had been a promise, a commitment, a declaration of love before either of them knew what love truly meant. And Kane had kept that promise every single day since, raising Thomas and all their children with unwavering devotion, building a life and a family that stood as a testament to what love truly meant. In the autumn of 1902, as the new century was still young and full of promise, Kane and Zelda celebrated their 24th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren. The ranch house was full to bursting, echoing with laughter and conversation, and the sounds of a family that knew it was loved. That night, after everyone had gone to bed or returned to their own homes, Kane and Zelda lay together in the bed they had shared for so many years. The moonlight streamed through the window, painting everything in silver. "You ever wonder how different our lives would have been if we had not met that day?" Zelda asked. "Sometimes," Kane admitted, "but I cannot imagine any other life than this one. Cannot imagine not having you, not having our children and grandchildren, not building this ranch together." "I think we were meant to find each other," Zelda said. "I think Sarah guided you to that bench at exactly the right moment." "Maybe she did," Kane said softly. "I like to think she would be happy with how things turned out, that she would be proud of the family we built." "She would be," Zelda assured him, "because you kept your promise to her. You saved a woman and a child from shame and hardship. You gave us everything." "You gave me everything," Kane countered. "You gave me purpose and love and a family. You made me into the man I always wanted to be." They fell asleep as they had countless times before, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in a love that had been tested and proven strong enough to last a lifetime. The Atwood Ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, eventually passing to his children and then their children. The name Atwood became synonymous with integrity and quality throughout Nevada, a legacy that grew from a single act of kindness on a dusty street in White Pine. And though the world changed around them, though the Wild West gave way to modernity and progress, the story of Kane and Zelda Atwood lived on. It was told to children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passed down as a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the truth that family is built not just through blood but through love. Years later, when both Kane and Zelda had passed peacefully in their sleep within days of each other, having lived long, full lives surrounded by love, their family gathered to honor their memory. Thomas, now an old man himself with grandchildren of his own, stood at their graveside and spoke of his parents with a voice thick with emotion. "My father once told me that the measure of a man is not in how he falls, but in how he rises, not in his mistakes, but in how he makes things right," Thomas said. Kane Atwood lived that truth every day of his life. He saw someone who needed help, and he did not hesitate. "He gave my mother and me his name, his love, his protection, and he never once treated me as anything less than his son." What Thomas did not know, what he would never need to know, was that Kane had not been his biological father. That truth had died with Kane and Zelda, a secret they had kept to protect their son, to give him the gift of complete belonging. Because in the end, it did not matter. Kane had been Thomas's father in every way that counted, from the moment he placed his hand on Zelda's pregnant belly and claimed them both as his own. The legacy Kane and Zelda left behind was not just a successful ranch or a large family, though they left both. Their true legacy was the proof that love can appear in the most unexpected moments, that families can be built on foundations of choice and commitment, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is offer help to a stranger. On that hot August day in 1878, when Zelda Ashford stepped off a stagecoach in White Pine, Nevada, hiding her pregnancy under a shawl, she could never have imagined the beautiful life that awaited her. And when Kane Atwood noticed her condition and spoke those 4 life-changing words, he could not have known that he was not just saving her but saving himself as well, finding the love and family he had been longing for without realizing it. Their story became legend in their family, told and retold as an example of what true love looked like. Not the passionate whirlwind of romance novels, but something deeper and more enduring. A love built on respect and kindness, on showing up day after day, on choosing each other over and over again, even when it would have been easier to walk away. And somewhere, perhaps, Sarah Atwood smiled down on the brother she had lost too soon, proud of how he had taken his grief and turned it into something beautiful, how he had kept his promise to her, and in doing so had found his own happiness. The Atwood Ranch still stands today, run by the 5th generation of Atwoods, all of them descended from a frightened young woman and a compassionate cowboy, who saw past her shame to the person who needed help. They carry on the traditions of hard work and integrity that Kane established, treating their employees fairly and their land with respect. And every August, on the anniversary of the day Zelda arrived in White Pine, the family gathers at the original ranch house, now preserved as a historic site. They share the story of how it all began, how one act of kindness rippled out through time to create a legacy that spans generations, because that is what love does. It does not just change the present, it shapes the future. It creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see, touching lives we will never meet, building legacies that outlast our time on Earth. Kane and Zelda Atwood's love story was not conventional, but it was real and true and powerful. It proved that families are made through commitment, that fathers are defined by actions, not biology, and that sometimes the most important words a person can say are simple ones spoken from the heart. I'll be the father. 4 words that changed everything. 4 words that built a dynasty. 4 words that proved love is not about where you start, but about the choice you make to stay.